Hey gang, welcome back to another edition of Intuitive Angling. Really appreciate you guys checking today's video out. And today I'm going to give you guys some tips and advice, and we're going to have a little discussion on crawdads. And what I want to do with this, I want to give you guys some real world foundational information and advice about crawdads you can use in your fishing, because you hear a lot of different stuff about crawdads. There's a lot of research out on them, but I've been around crawdads since literally I was 4 or 5 years old, playing with them and catching them. I know a lot about them, and I've learned some stuff that you can directly correlate in real life fishing situations about crawdads. I'm going to go over with you guys today. I think you guys will really get a lot out of it. Real quick, I just want to remind you guys before we get started about our View Products tab here on the channel. When you guys click on the video, you'll notice at the bottom of the video there it says View Products. I put products on there I think you guys might be interested, and every time you click on one of those, the channel gets 20 cents. So if you click on 5 of them, we get $1. Literally takes a couple seconds to do that. It's a great way to support the channel here. Much appreciated. Okay guys, crawdads, man. I started catching crawdads down at Turkey Creek by my mom and dad's house when my earliest memories. It had to be 5 or 6 years old. And I just love them, man. They're so fascinating to watch, and you know, that's where I learned a lot about nature, is turning rocks over and catching crawdads. And they've been a big part of bass fishing and my bass fishing ever since you know, I've been fishing. The crawdads are really fascinating creatures. I mean, they've been on the planet. They estimate they've been here between 30 to some of the most common fossil remains are dated back like 30 million years. But they have found some crawdad fossil remains in Australia that they date back to 129 million years. So they've been here forever. So they've been very adaptable to their environment. True survivors, you know, for sure. Here's what I've learned about crawdads. I'm gonna sort of give you guys a foundational advice, some advice on it, because there's a lot of myths surrounding how you correlate crawdad imitating lures to bass fishing. One of the things that I'll tell you guys right off the bat about crawdads that I've learned from my own experience is you can pretty much forget about match the hatch. I mean, I spent so much time turning over rocks and studying crawdad colors and trying to match the colors specifically to the crawdads I'm finding, whether they had different shades of blue or orange or red or black or whatever. And guys, I have seen almost no correlation between matching the hatch on crawdads and catching fish on it. I'll give you guys a prime example. I've talked about this several times before. You know, down at Grand Lake, a lot of times during the springtime of the year, the crawdads, a lot of them are brown and green and blue. I've tried to match that type of color on my jigs and stuff. Doesn't make any difference between the color I'm using. But the thing that really got me on it is years ago, down at Lake Mead, I was fishing Bassmaster tournament. And every dang bass I caught, it had a crawdad in its throat, and these pinchers were bright red. I'm talking about you look like you took spray paint and sprayed them all with red dye. The whole pincher's on there. Never seen anything like it. So I started making up a bunch of, you know, green and black and red pinchered crawdads. I couldn't get a bite on them. And I've seen this over and over again. So don't worry about matching the crawdad color to the lures that you're fishing. Here's the advice I'm going to give you guys on crawdads. First of all, you want to fish your crawdad lures most of the time in early spring, and then again in fall. In early spring, that's when they start to come out. That's when they're a little bit more active. I think that bass really prefer a crawdad when that water temperature is in the 50s, because they're thinking about spawning. Crawdads are a big protein source. It's an easy meal to them. It helps them build up their egg sacs, the excess protein. So they really feed on crawdads heavily during the pre-spawn period of the year, late winter and pre-spawn. And then also in the fall months of the year, they feed up heavily on crawdads that time of year too, because the fall time of the year is one of the top mating seasons for crawdads, and there's a lot of crawdads that molt in the fall time of the year. So the combination of those two makes for an easier meal on there. I don't really use too much crawdad imitators in the middle of the winter or in the summertime. I think the summertime of the year is probably the time when crawdad imitating lures are least effective. And when we're talking crawdad imitating lures, I'm talking lures like jigs, talking lures like certain type of crankbaits, maybe some type of creature baits, that type of thing. Not that you can't catch fish on jigs that time of year, but in the summertime. But my jig colors tend to be more perch patterns than the crawdad patterns during the summertime of the year. Colors is another thing here. Again, I have spent decades and decades trying to make this correlation with colors, and here's what I found out about colors and crawfish imitating lures. I don't pay any attention to the color of crawdads, but here's what I figured out about it is the color of the crawdad imitating lure that you want to match is tied into your water clarity. It's not tied into the color of the crawdad. So if I'm in a general rule of thumb, I'll sort of go from the dirtier water up until the clear water. If I'm in a dirty water situation, like where that water clarity is like under 12 inches, I'm using some type of a crawfish imitating lure that has like a brown, black, and a lot of orange in it. At least half orange. I really put a lot of orange on it, and I'll put a lot of red on it. So orange, red, black, brown, that type of stuff. As the water temperature gets, or the water clarity gets a little bit clearer, like say that water visibility is between maybe say a foot and 3 foot of visibility, that's when I still stay with like some oranges and browns, but I put less accent on the orange and I put more accent on the brown. Sometimes I'll throw in some blue too. So for example, if I'm using a crawdad pattern crankbait, I may have a crawdad pattern crankbait that has some brown and green on the sides, maybe an orange belly, and then I may take like a little blue Sharpie marker and I'll paint just some stripes or something on blue on the side of the crankbait. Same with my jigs. I'll start adding some brown, some blue, and orange. That's one of the colors we make in the Blockhead Old School jig. That's why I created that color, because that's good in that 2 to 3 foot water visibility. Now, as the water visibility gets greater than 3 feet and you start getting into clear water situations, that's when I don't really care for the accent colors too much. I'm going more with like a straight green pumpkin or straight brown. Like a solid brown rubber is really good in clear water. I will use some type of green too, green and brown together, but most of the time I'm not using any type of significant accent color like an orange or a blue or red or something like that if the water's a little bit clearer. So that's some of the things that's been effective for me. And then when you're talking about a creature bait or a jig, as far as matching it, which they're crawdad resembling lures. A lot of times if you go to like a black neon or a solid black or something like that, or black and blue, obviously that doesn't have much to do with a crawdad, but it has to do with more silhouetting the bait in that dirtier water. So it's not, you're not trying to match a crawdad by going to like a black neon on a jig or a black neon on a beaver or something like that. It's basically a silhouette situation with that. Another thing I found out about crawdads and bass, as far as the crawdad imitating lures, is I do a lot better using the erratic retrieve on whether it be crankbaits or slow baits, jigs, creature baits, like whatever. If you've ever studied crawdads in the water a lot, crawdads have a lot of anxiety. In fact, there's been studies that correlate the anxiety levels in humans with crawdads, and they are very wary. And if you notice them, crawdads, they can accelerate extremely fast. And if they're being threatened, they've really got two options. They can either flare their craws out and try to intimidate, the predator, which they do sometimes, and that works because a bass will hesitate in hitting a larger crawdad that has their pinchers all flared out. It really will. It'll get all around that crawdad and a lot of times not hit it. But the biggest defense mechanism they have is their speed. They really can propel backwards tremendously fast, and that's why on a crawdad imitating lures, I like to use some type of a stop and go retrieve on my crankbaits. Maybe stop it and speed it up real quick, or I like to hop my jigs pretty hard and pretty high off the bottom. I think that generates that reaction strike, thinking it's a crawdad a little bit more. So anyway, guys, just a few overviews of crawdads. Like I said, bass love them. You know, I think they prefer crawdad over shad if they can get it most of the time. But overall, just what I'm trying to give you guys here is don't let the color of the crawdads in the lake determine the color of bait you try to use, and try to stick with your crawdad imitators in the late winter up until the early spring, and then again in the fall. And if you do that, I think it'll add up to a lot more fish. So again, thanks for tuning in, guys, and please, if you haven't, hit that subscribe button. That'd be much appreciated, and the notification button so you don't miss any videos, and we'll check in later. See you.